welcome to this week's episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. As per usual, a big thank you to everybody that watched last week's episode of the show, liked, commented, all that kind of stuff. That's very, very much appreciated. Did send off the link to the show to Max at White Pigs, but haven't heard anything back, so either that means they haven't watched it or they might not have liked some of the things I said. It's not unusual in actual fact. I send sort of like, reps and what have you, that, links to the episodes I've done on them, and I might get back the sort of, well, thanks, I'll share that with so and so, or that kind of thing. I mean, sometimes I hear absolutely nothing at all. So what one assumes, like I said, I guess. Anyway, it's like the episode I did on Tomintoul. I sent it to Ben, and he said, "Oh, I'll pass it on." And I suppose probably not going to hear anything back from them. I mean, I suppose when you call the owners of the company sort of old dinosaurs, they're probably not inclined to give you a nice reply either. They're probably more likely to say something something else, I imagine. But anyway, like I said, I like to think that I give a fair appraisal, and I'm happy to sort of stand by the comments I make in episodes of the show, and obviously the comments I do make are wholly my own and have no bearing or relevance to the company that employs me, just in case. Anyway, so on to today's episode of the show. As you can see from the title page, I'm looking at a selection of, I say recent, or I've kind of collected them together like I do a lot of independents. Anyway, so we're looking again at a selection of releases from the independent bottling company Glaschu Spirits. As you know, I did an episode on them last year and obviously came across them, and the thing that sort of stood out to me obviously was the labels. I absolutely loved the labels. I thought they were really, really good. And before you say it, yes, I do say labelling and frippery is completely irrelevant. It's the juice in the bottle that counts, and of course that is wholly true. But of course, as you may well know, or may well not know, I don't know, before I started this line of work, I was obviously an artist, and sort of, so I have, and I've obviously designed the labels for the Gauntlet's bottlings, and so I think I know good design when I come across it, and the labels really appealed. But no, it is very true that when you ignore all of that, it is wholly about what the juice in the bottle is all about. But having a nice label is certainly, when they sit on the shelf, is an attractive thing. And as you well know, if you watched the last episode of the show that I did on Glashu, each label has a story behind it. And if you're going to put that much kind of time and thought and effort into producing a label like that, then one hopes that you put the same level of time, thought and effort into sourcing good casks, and maybe not overly finishing. But anyway, I'm going to crack on with the lineup, because obviously I want to explain what each label's significance is. But before we do that, big thank you to Paul Jameson from Glaschu Spirits for the samples for today's episode of the show. So without further ado, let's take a look at today's lineup. Okay, so we're going to kick off with a 7-year-old Tomintoul. It was distilled in August of 2016, bottled in March of last year, and spent 2 years finishing in an ex-first fill Madeira cask, bottled at 50%. Now, as you can see from the label, it features a balloon. You're thinking, what? All the labels have, I believe, a connection with Glasgow, because obviously Glasgow is where the company is based, and this is apparently a chap called Vincenzo Lunardi's hydrogen balloon, which he was the first person to fly apparently from Scotland to England on the 16th of October 1785. On the label, the balloon is shown passing over the St Mungo's. Great name, huh? St Mungo. And Midge, possibly? or if you get that relevance, you're as old as me. So yeah, St Mungo's Cathedral, where apparently it was hung after it done its job, and because of the Italian connection, they decided to use an Italian sweet wine for the finishing. So Pretty cool, yeah, like that. Bottling number 2 is a 12-year-old Burnside. This was distilled in April of 2011, bottled in March of 2024. 12 years old, bottled at 50%, like all of their bottlings, which is cool. Obviously no colouring, no filtration. For those of you that don't know, Burnside is teaspooned Balvenie. I think they use teaspoon of Glenfiddich, I think, if memory serves me correct. Anyway, so this was, like I said, was spent 2 years finishing in first fill Amarone barrique, and on the label it shows a picture of a subway train, underground train. This is Glasgow subway apparently, which was built in 1896 and is the third oldest in the world, behind London built in 1863 and Istanbul built in 1875. Now if you look carefully at the background of the image, you will see there is an advertising poster which advertising the first bottling that Glaschu Spirits did. That's very cool. That's, yeah, like that. So, bottling number 2. Let's hope the juice is damn good, because you don't see very much in the way of Burnside. So, unusual bottling. As we said, I think I've only ever tasted about 3, maybe 4 bottlings of Burnside in all the years I've been doing this. Anyway, on to bottling number 3. This is back to the single malt. This is a 13-year-old Teaninich. Bottled at 50%, distilled in February of 2011, bottled in September of last year, and it spent 26 months finishing in a Saint-Emilion red wine cask. Obviously Saint-Emilion is a region of Bordeaux in France. Now, I like the label. Apparently it shows a Hillman Imp rally car, which is drifting around a dirt track adjacent to the distillery. Now I'm trying to remember who the hell built Hillman, who built Hillman Imps. Hillman, oh for God's sake. But I don't think were they a Scottish company? I mean, I don't know. I certainly remember them as a child. They were certainly interesting looking cars. I think a bit asthmatic, I believe. I don't think the engines were particularly powerful, and they probably were, given they were built in Britain, they probably weren't built particularly well either, as is often the case with 1970s British cars. Anyway, enough about that. Moving on to the next bottling. This is a series of 2 bottlings in actual fact from one of my favourite distilleries. Yeah, Macduff. So the first bottling is a 16-year-old Macduff, distilled in November of 2007, bottled in August of 2024, October of 2024. 12 months Oloroso finishing. And I'm going to introduce both of them together because of the link. The second one again is a 16-year-old distilled and bottled at the same time, but this spent 12 months finishing in XPX quarter cask. Now on the label you'll see that there are, on both of them, there are trains. On the first bottle in the Oloroso quarter cask, it depicts the London to Glasgow Coronation Scot, which was owned by London Midland and Scottish Railway and ran on the east coast London to Glasgow rail track. And on the other bottling of Macduff there is a West Coast Express train, a Lambie number 17, that was run by Caledonian Railways. Apparently you're probably thinking, well, yeah, all right, so they both ran to Scotland. I mean, big deal. Apparently, back in the day, it was called the Race to the North, and I imagine that they both railway owning companies attempted to sort of do it in the quickest time. Bugger whether the passengers were actually sort of safe or not. They were probably thrown all over the place, I would imagine. But anyway, that was the that was how it was back in the day, as they say. Anyway, on to the final bottling of the day, and I finished with a bit of peat, which I always enjoy. This is a 12-year-old Coal Ila. This is finished for 13 months in a first fill ruby port barrique, and I will just draw your attention to the colour, because I don't know if I'm really doing it justice, because that's a lovely colour, a lovely sort of ruby hue to it. So this was distilled in January of 2012, bottled in February of 2024, and like I said, spent 13 months finishing in first fill ruby port barrique. Now, so on the label you can see is a flying boat, which is really cool. It's called the Sanders Row Princess, and was apparently the world's second largest flying boat, and it's shown over the Sound of Ila. Now, I don't know whether the boat was built in Scotland or not, so maybe we are being a bit tenuous with these sort of links, but maybe it was built in Glasgow. Like I said, all the labels have a connection to Glasgow, so maybe it was. Anyway, the interesting thing about this is if you look at the actual plane itself, and here's the clever bit, I think, it has 26 windows on the plane. Now, those 26 windows represent the 26 fans of of Glaschu Spirits, who basically funded the first part of the bottling of this cask, which was bottled in October of 2023, which I think might have been their first release. So this is the second half of the cask, a little bit older, but yeah, like I said, I think these labels, there's been an awful lot of thought gone into them, so I'm hoping that there's been an equal amount of thought that's gone into the casks, but as you know, we will only find out by tasting them. So let's kick off with the first bottle. Okay, so 7-year-old Tomintoul. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? It's a little raw. Now, I will be honest and say that I have never come across a private bottling of Tomintoul that I've really liked, and I don't really find young Tomintoul to be particularly attractive either. I mean, the distillery 10-year-old is all right, but again, there's a hardness there, and I think Tomintoul is one of those whiskies that really needs some time just to lose that hardness, that sort of. I mean, yeah, okay, so the Madeira is adding that sort of biscuitiness, and is kind of, I wouldn't say filling out some of the holes, but it's certainly giving it a little bit more complexity than it would have had if it was just purely bottled from a bourbon cask. There's a little bit of straw, there's some apricot, there's some barley. It's okay. It's very typical of young Tomintoul at the end of the day, and like I said, some people will really love it, and I personally find, yeah, I go a little bit cold, but anyway, let's see what the palate like. It's a bit short, it's a bit hot, it's a bit raw on the finish. It kicks off with the Madeira cask, the sort of the winey dried fruits, the biscuitiness, and it doesn't really have much of a finish. It all kind of stops about sort of midway. There's a bit of barley. I think it's just too young at the end of the day. I don't think it really needed to be bottled. I mean, it's interesting. Yes, it's Tomintoul. You don't see it very often in the Indies, but like I said, I really think that Tomintoul just needs time. I've never found one, like I said, even distillery bottling wise, that I would rave about at this sort of age. So yeah, okay, good one to start with, I suppose. Okay, so let's move on to the Burnside. Let's see what this gives us on the nose then, shall we? It's quite herbal, quite winey. There's an almost saline-like character, a bit of apricot, but again, I'm not getting much beyond the cask. I'm not getting any of that sort of expected Balvenie fruit. I'm not getting any malt. It's, I really hate to say it, but it's a little bit underwhelming. I mean, it's not. There's no off notes. There's no dirtiness. There's nothing wrong with it. But it's just not really exciting. It has to be said. Let's see if the palate's any different. Well, it kicks off with some nice winey sort of Amarone dried red fruits. and then that kind of peters out on the mid palate, and I get this kind of almost kind of herbal, grainy, sort of hard barley kind of character coming through. It's a little bit hot, it's a little bit raw, shall we say. It's not the greatest bottling of Burnside I've ever come across, and it's kind of like, well, you know, did they sell this off because it didn't quite have that sort of, you know, lovely sort of fleshiness that Balvenie can often have. But then, even then, in saying that, I find Balvenie can be often quite what's the right word? Word iffy springs to mind, but no, that's not the word I was looking for. It can be quite sort of variable. That's the word I was struggling for. Yeah, I have tasted really good bottlings of Balvenie, but equally I've tasted bottlings that just sort of are really quite hard work. And don't get me started about the bloody Peat Week bottling. Oh, no. Peat and Balvenie, no, not a good combination. Anyway, I'm kind of getting slightly sidetracked there. Okay, it's a pleasant enough bottling, but it really doesn't sort of, like, you know, float my boat, as they say. Right, okay, so let's move on to the 13-year-old Teaninich. So even though it's been spent 13 months finishing in a wine cask, there's not an awful lot of colour on that. It's sort of very much, you know, I would, looking at it, think, well, American oak. Okay, so there's a bit of green apple, there's a bit of stewed fruit, there's some sour red fruit. There's a sort of almost kind of juniper-y kind of spirit note. I mean, the thing with Teaninich is that sometimes it can not have a huge amount of character anyway. It does kind of sit in the kind of, you know, citric, grassy, Speyside end of the sort of spectrum, and it can sometimes be a little bit one-dimensional, I suppose. And okay, on the plus side, I'm getting plenty of distillery character, you know, and it's nicely balanced, but again, it's kind of, okay, you know, it is Teaninich after all. I mean, you know, there's got a nice kind of slightly sort of soft perfume note from the red wine fruits. Yeah, that's sort of the pass on. Okay, it's got a bit more going on the palate. So it begins with the sour red fruit that I got on the nose, moving into green apple, barley, grass, citrus. There's a little bit of rose petally note there, just on the mid palate, which kind of continues through into the finish. The wine notes do kind of sort of stop around about mid palate wise, so you do get plenty of the distillery character coming through on the finish. There's a bit of a odd wininess on the aftertaste, sort of coming across almost like a sort of slightly metallic note. But overall, I think the palate is showing a lot more complexity than the nose. It certainly has plenty of distillery character, and you know, it's well balanced. But again, it's just sort of, it's okay. Right, okay, so let's move on to the first of the two Macduff bottlings. Yes, indeed. So this is 12 months Oloroso quarter cask finish. Okay, right, well, I'm not getting my nose completely sort of like cleared out, and no, I'm not going to say. Right, okay, so let's move on to the first of the two 16-year-old Macduff bottlings. This is the Oloroso quarter cask finish. Let's see what the nose gets us on this end, shall we? Okay, Well, it's Macduff, okay? Macduff is never going to be the sort of soft, sexy kind of malt. There is always going to be a hardness there, and there is a hardness there. There is some distillery character, but it's not kind of like, you know, Macduffing my palate up, or my nose, as the case may be. It's actually pretty well balanced. There's an almost kind of wininess there. There's some baked apples, some toffee, barley, subtle sort of raisinated fruits. I like that. I mean, you know, Macduff is never a distillery that kind of I really warm to, but I think this is actually a really good expression. It certainly shows plenty of the, well, not plenty, it shows some distillery character, a toned down distillery character. I've come across, shall we say, more distillery character Macduffs over the years. And the sherry is balanced. You know, as you know, I don't dislike sherry, but sherry has got to be, you know, like wine casks and things like that, judiciously used. And I'll give the guys their kudos on this. That all of the ones that have had a finishing, all the bottlings so far, you know, shown a really good balance between the spirit and the finishing cask. So light touch. Yeah, this is a good whiskey. This is a nice whiskey, as nice as Macduff can be, shall we say? And you know, it's like I said, certain distilleries like Macduff and so on have that slightly industrial character, but when it's tempered, it's interesting. Let's do it in the pass one. That's a nice finish. That's got a lovely spiciness. Who the hell would have thought that would be saying that's a nice finish on a Macduff bottling? Yeah, okay. The Macduff character is there. There's that slight stringency, that hardness, certainly on the mid palate. There's a little bit more of the sherry character up front on the palate. A little bit more dried, raisinated fruits, that kind of thing. Slight tannic finish, a little bit of dustiness, sort of almost kind of moving into the coffeed end of the spectrum. You know, all in all, I think that's a really good bottling. I mean, it's a bottling that I wasn't expecting to, say, enjoy, in inverted commas, as much as you can enjoy Macduff. And, you know, I thought that really worked quite well. The finishings, to a certain extent, sort of offset some of the hardness of the distillery character. It was balanced, not too sherried, not too much distillery character, thankfully. Yeah, I think that worked really, really well. So that, bizarrely, I find the most impressive bottling so far. Right, okay, so moving on to the second Macduff. This is the PX quarter cask finish. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? PX. Lots of pruny, treacly, soft, PX, winey sherry. I mean, I don't even get any hardness, barley, anything like that. I don't get any Macduff character whatsoever. It is sherry. It's a sherry monster. And the first bottling that I've come across that is a bit too far into the finishing cask end of the spectrum. Obviously 12 months was far too long in this particular quarter cask. This was obviously a first fill quarter cask, maybe, or pretty active anyway. No distillery, no spirit character whatsoever. Let's do the pass line. It's like the nose. It's very sherried. It's very soft. It's treacly. It's pruny. There's a little astringency there. Touch of green fruit. A little bit of hard barley. So yeah, maybe some distillery character is kind of attempting to peek through. But on the whole, this particular bottling really does leave me cold, as as you well know, not a surprise to hear me say that about a big sherry monster, but you know, very clean, no sulphur, no off notes. So like I said, if that's your bag, you're gonna love it. Right, okay, so moving on to the final bottling of the day. This is the 12-year-old Coal Ila. Let's see what the nose gives us on this. Yeah, that's a lovely nose. The sort of the ruby port has given the peat a lovely, sweet, slightly syrupy coating. There's a bit of straw, some astringency, some menthol, herbal peat. Oh, you know, the more you stick your nose in that, the more this is a lovely whiskey. There is so much going on. There's a bit of coriander powder, a little bit of chocolate, some salt. This was frankly a bloody good cask, and again 13 months was just about right in the ruby port cask. It could have probably gone a bit more. It could have probably taken us up to about 24 months, I think. And it's just distillery character, peat, wininess, absolutely gorgeous. A lovely, lovely whiskey. And I think, you know, and if you were one of the original 26, then you bought yourself a bloody good bottling. You know, this second part of the cask, even so, you know, really, really good. That's what that's like. Oh, I mean, that's gorgeous. Sweet peat, red fruit, plenty of capsicum, green pepper, vanilla. There's a little bit of rye spice. There's the wininess of the ruby port. It's got that slight syrupy note. Lovely bourbony kind of mid palate, and you get that kind of almost kind of sweet corn and rye notes before moving back into the peat on the finish, and the syrup and the red fruits, and oh, that is bloody good. That is a lovely whiskey. I mean, that was one hell of a cask, it has to be said. A little bit of licorice and bog myrtle on the aftertaste. That is really long. That is lingering. That is a superb cask, it has to be said. So, oh, it's nice to finish on a good one, isn't it? Right, okay, so let's on today's episode of the show. Firstly, a big thank you to Paul from Glaschu Spirits for the samples for today's episode of the show. You might think that I've possibly been a little bit hard on the guys at Glaschu, and well, you know, you wouldn't expect anything other than, you know, than an honest appraisal. And you know, overall, I think the quality of what they've bottled and the quality of the cask is also really, really good. I think the finishing is absolutely spot on. I mean, bar the sort of the PX finish Macduff, I think all the rest of the bottlings showed a really good balance between spirit character and finishing cask. Some, I think, for me personally, I would have sat on a little bit longer, and one I probably would have not bottled at all. So the one that I would have sat on for a bit longer is the Tomintoul. I just think Tomintoul, just like I said, I think it just needs more time. It is not a whiskey that is kind of, should I say, designed in inverted commas for bottling at sort of at such a young age. It just needs more time in the cask. I think that's certainly from my perspective and the bottlings that I've tasted, that's what I've come to believe. Anyway, the Burnside, I just don't think that was a particularly great cask at the end of the day. I think that was the one that really stands out in this lineup for the wrong reasons. I don't think that was a great whiskey, a great cask of whiskey. I think that's probably, and I hate to say it, that's probably why they kind of flogged this one off. It didn't show any real kind of great Balvenie character. and I hate to say it, but this is probably why Paul probably chucked it into an Amarone sort of barrique to kind of like, you know, mitigate the cask at the end of the day. And you know, there's no harm in doing that. You know, independents buy these casks all the time, and they might not be exactly quite pan out as they do. So you try and do something with it. So it balance-wise was good, but I don't think the cask was ever a great one to start off with. The Teaninich, like I said, not my bag at the end of the day, but again balanced really nicely. Plenty of Teaninich character to a certain extent. You know, it's a fairly sort of citric spade by numbers, it has to be said, but you know, it was balanced. So you know, it was a successful bottling, but it just didn't get kind of the juices going at the end of the day. Surprise of the day was the Oloroso finished Macduff. And like I said, even sort of distilleries that have that kind of slightly hard industrial character, sometimes, you know, like I say, every dog has its day. You know, even bloody Deanston, for God's sake, has its day occasionally. Well, maybe once in a blue moon, maybe once in a millennium, possibly. I don't know. Anyway, that was a good bottling. I mean, if you want to experience what. Yeah, you've got to experience Macduff every now and again. You know, that was not a bad bottling to go for. Unfortunately, the second bottling of Macduff just was too much sherry. There was no distillery character there whatsoever, so it was just a bit of a sherry monster. Standout bottling, standout cask, without a shadow of a doubt, was the Coal Ila. I mean, it was stunning. I mean, I know you've got to go a long way to cock up a Coal Ila. It is a distillery that is just so proficient at sort of bottling good spirit and producing good spirit. I mean, you know, not to say that there hasn't been the odd iffy bottling of Coal Ila. Nothing is ever 100% perfect, but that, again, the balance between the Coal Ila and the finishing cask was absolutely spot on. So absolutely lovely, really nice way to end. So there you have it. You know, please pick up a bottling of Glaschu Spirits bottlings. Certainly the Coal Ila, get that if you love the peated malts. Yeah, good fun episode of the show. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you don't think it was overly critical. I hope you think it was a fair appraisal. So until next week, all that's left to say is good afternoon and good dram.